Well, now we are going to move on to our next presentation. And Lisa, can you say hello?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am an associate professor of medicine here at UAB. I'm a research scientist, so the bulk of my work is spent in a lab, and I run a small team of individuals. And today I want to talk with you about a topic that I think probably crosses a lot of industries, not just academia, but elsewhere. And I'm really pleased to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today about sponsorship.
Well, yeah, if you could just share your screen, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. So let's see. So I think this is the correct screen for you.
Yes,
I have two monitors in my office, so I have to check that out first. But I do want to talk today about sponsorship. It's, I think, a really important topic and not one that gets a lot of coverage. And it's important for careers. So I just explained a little bit about myself, what I do on a daily basis. And I just say this because my perspective about sponsorship is really from my experience in academia. And so while I feel like it translates to a lot of industries, some may be particularly appropriate to mine. So I like to start with the end in mind and give you some take-home messages. First of all, sponsors are unique from mentors, advisors, and coaches. And that secondly, successful sponsorship really begins with you. You developing your own excellence, intentional and broad networking, as well as clear asks for what you would like a sponsor to do. And I've organized our conversation today around these three questions. What is a sponsor? Why do I need one? And how do I get one? So what is a sponsor? I like this quote. Sponsorship is the act of highly influential leaders advocating for talented individuals. And I think the key words are advocating and talented. So there are distinctions between sponsors and other types of advisors that you may have in your life. First, a mentor is someone who advises and guides. They're focused on your career development. And they typically have a broad spectrum of emotional, social, and technical aspects of the work that you do. They work with you one-on-one behind the scenes. They're typically senior to you, but they can be peers or near peers. And on some occasions, a junior individual may mentor you. They typically are fairly long-term, but as your career transitions from one level to the next, a mentor may find themselves less able to advise you and they may step back. The important thing about what a mentor does is that they foster your reputation by facilitating your skills and abilities. A coach is similar, but they are much more targeted. So they will develop skills. And again, they're focused on career development, but they will help you identify weak spots or blind spots. They typically will have a specific goal in mind to help you achieve a task. There will be benchmarks, and so often this is time delimited. And as soon as you meet the benchmark, that relationship will end. They, again, are behind the scenes and work with you one-on-one to develop your abilities and in your reputation. A sponsor is unique in that they are individuals who introduce you or put you forward for opportunities, and they're focused more on career advancement than career development. They're typically someone who is influential, and they provide their network and provide their own reputation to vouch for yours. This is typically a long-term relationship, although it can be episodic to facilitate your next step. Importantly, sponsors are the ones who are out front. They engage with their network, often without you even being present. And so they're fostering your reputation largely because they're aligning it with their own. So mentors are the people who talk with you. Sponsors are the people who talk about you. This is a nice paradigm described by Herminia Ibarra. The continuation between a mentor to a sponsor. Mentor is a much more private relationship, whereas a sponsor is really very public. But there are aspects of mentorship that may meld into sponsorship. And I say this because sometimes you will find that your mentor actually also functions as a sponsor. And then other times they really work well within a more private environment, providing you behind the scenes support. And sponsorship, being publicly outward, actually facilitates careers in a different way. And so you may have a mentor who's a sponsor, or you may have them independently. So why do you need a sponsor? I'm going to focus on my arena, which is academia. And the graph on the left, I'm data oriented, so I apologize for the graphs, but the graph on the left, the chartreuse or light green colored line is the graduation rate of men, the percentage of men graduating from medical school. And the red line is the counterpart for women. And what you can see is that around 2007 and 2008, women and men graduating from medical school were on parity with each other. And in my world, I'm a PhD, and women and men actually reached parity in terms of graduation with PhDs in the biological sciences a good bit before this. And today, more women graduate with a PhD in biological sciences than men. But that doesn't translate into the highest levels in academia. And so the graph on the right actually shows you the percentage of women at each level. The top purple line is the beginning level instructor. And more than 50% of the population of instructors are women. As you move down in the graph, you're reaching higher and higher levels in the professoriate. And you'll see that in the assistant professor, which is the dark green line, it's already below 50% women. And then as you progress more, it gets even less. And people have proposed in years past that this is because of the workforce. There aren't as many women around to advance to these levels. But more recently today, people recognize that there's a glass ceiling that is not being penetrated. And in my world, that's at the full professor into leadership roles of chairmanships and deans, but it refers also to the C-suite. And so it's thought that sponsorship actually is a critical element to breaking through that glass ceiling. And this was a nice study done by Gallup where they asked people if they had a mentor at work and if they had a sponsor at work. And you can see in the green that about 40% of people said they had a mentor at work. And that was about half that for those who had sponsors. And importantly, women seem to be on the high end for mentors, but on the low end for sponsorship. And this was another study done more recently by the Center for Talent Innovation. And they looked at a number of different metrics of sort of satisfaction with your advancement in your career. And what they found was that regardless of the metric they looked at, those individuals who had a sponsor had greater satisfaction than those who did not have a sponsor. And in some cases, the bump was quite high. And this was true across all of the demographics that they examined. Importantly, this was a study done looking at individuals who had received early grants from the National Institutes of Health. And they looked at whether these men and women had either a male or female sponsor. And so the first set of bars is a composite metric. And among those, the darkest bar is men who had a male mentor. The next one is men who had a female mentor. The next one is women who had a male mentor. And the final one is women who had a female mentor. And what you see is that the percentage who achieved that metric of success in their careers was higher when those individuals had a male as a mentor. And Dr. Smith and Johnson reflected in a publication of theirs that when women were mentored by men, they made more money, got more promotions, and had better career outcomes, not because men were better mentors, but because they have more power. And this is important as we move on to look at how to get a sponsor, to determine what kind of demographics in a sponsor are you really going to want to look at. So how do you get a sponsor? So this is a nice ABCDs of sponsorship that was designed by Dr. Rosalind Chow. And she talked about each one of these is an aspect of what a sponsor provides. So A is for amplify, and that is where a sponsor talks about and promotes the successes of the protege. What this does is it creates a positive impression among their own network about the protege. B is for boost, and this is formally putting people forward, recommending them for positions or advancement. And this increases the expectation that the protege is ready to take that challenge on. C is for connect, and this is where the sponsor introduces the protege to high status individuals or brings them to exclusive meetings or brings them to the table, so that they have an opportunity to contribute. And what this does, in addition to increasing positive reflections, it also increases the visibility of the protege. And finally, D is for defend. And this is where the sponsor can mitigate a negative perception by the broader field, maybe providing an alternative explanation for what might be perceived as a negative performance, but actually could be a strength. And what this does is it reverses or neutralizes any negative perspective that others might have about the protege. And remember, all of these things may be happening when the protege is not present. So in order to get yourself ready for a sponsor, I like the idea of doing a SWOT analysis about yourself. So identifying your strengths. What are your experiences? What do you bring to the table? What are your opportunities? Have a plan. I mean, this is your 1 year, 5 year, 10-year plan. Where are you now and where do you want to go? And what is it that you think a sponsor could help you with? Weaknesses might be things that you need to work with a coach on, or just take a leadership course. As Anna was talking about, how to become an authentic leader may fall into this category. And then finally, threats. In some cases, if you've been in one position for a long time, people no longer see you as potentially being able to move up. And so are there aspects of enhancing your skill sets or changing those kinds of challenges and turning them into a positive? Then it transitions over to identifying a sponsor. So who do they know? Are they an influencer who's positioned to help you with the next step? Do they know you and what you're capable of? Are they responsive, a good listener? Is this someone that you're going to work well with? And then finally, remember, you may need more than one to help you along this path. You also need to be aware of the expectations. When and how often will you meet? Frequently, you want to make it short because everyone's so busy. The demographics, who's going to be best positioned to help you? Remember, this is a strategic relationship. It's not a friendship, although you may become friends over time. And then you want to be able to say yes to stretch assignments. Your sponsor may think you're ready for something when you think you're not. But this is a way to overcome imposter syndrome, where you may be reluctant to put yourself forward. And then you want to try to reciprocate with your sponsor. They're going to be facilitating your career, but there are things that you can do to facilitate theirs. And then you want to be proactive and stay in touch. And of course, thank them, because studies suggest that sponsors do this because they are gratified by the success of others. And so thanking them for their assistance actually feeds that feeling. And then you want to get noticed. So you want to look for opportunities for a potential sponsor to know about your work. You can ask for an introduction from someone else that you know. You can use professional networks and organizations and meetings such as this one to introduce yourself to someone and begin that conversation. Leadership development programs may give you entree to someone who is in a leadership role and might be able to open doors for you. And then, of course, to the extent that you're able to get on high impact projects or high visibility teams, that can enhance your potential sponsor noticing you. And then volunteering in the community. Oftentimes, outside the professional sphere, individuals will have a network that is extremely different than yours. And so by working in the community, you actually expand your network in ways that may be more limited by staying in your own field. And I've mentioned networking repeatedly because I think it's a critical piece in getting a sponsor. It's important for a lot of reasons, but networking through social media, who do you follow? Who do they follow? Oftentimes, if you follow someone, they follow you back. And that may give you entree to individuals that you might not be aware of otherwise. Being ready with an elevator pitch or as someone told me, a wow statement. This statement that you say about what you do that causes somebody to say, wow, that's really interesting. Tell me more. If you're going to an in-person event, pick 5 people that you'd like to get to know better and ask them to meet for coffee. Have a specific topic or a question that you want to engage with them about. And then also cold emails, reaching out to someone to say, I noticed you in the news. I thought what you're doing is very interesting. And then utilizing your personal contacts. And what you really want to be doing is thinking about the questions. Who am I? What am I working on now? What is my ultimate goal? And how can a sponsor help me in that trajectory? And importantly, this has to be an authentic relationship, as Anna was talking about. Authentic feels better to you, and it will resonate better with others. You need to be prepared for the contact, be on time and professional, engage in small talk. A sponsor doesn't want to get used, but if you engage in small talk, it gives you that opportunity to develop a rapport. And then, as I said before, you want to provide a reciprocal value, and you want to nurture that contact with periodic engagement. And I love this quote by Albert Einstein. I don't think he was talking about networking, but he said, I have no special talents. I'm only passionately curious. And I think passionate curiosity is actually a really interesting way of developing your network. If you're passionately curious about other people, they will engage more with you. So I like to end with almost action items because I think that this is a process. So the first is to identify your wants, where it is that you want to go next. This is about knowing your strengths and weaknesses. It's about shoring up weaknesses and developing a game plan. The second is establishing your own reputation, what makes you ready for that next step. So be the expert, gain credentials that put you in a good position and may put you in a better position than others who might vie for the same position. Grow your network. Who knows you? It's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. You want to increase not only the number of people who know you, but you want to actually increase the number of people who know what you're interested in and what you're good at. You want to ask for a specific task from a sponsor. The sponsor will help you, but they will specifically ask you, what would you like them to do? And with that direction, they can be most effective. And then finally, you want to capitalize on the opportunity. So you want to really grab that opportunity and step into it, because in a sponsorship relationship, your sponsor's reputation is reliant on you doing a good job. And so by capitalizing on that opportunity, you're actually repaying your sponsor as well. And so with that, I would like to thank you for listening to me, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about sponsorship.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. We've had a lot of questions that have come in from the chat. Let's start with, this is one that came in earlier. Margaret says, I'm later in my career and my mentors are retiring. You mentioned a younger mentor. Could I get a younger mentor?
I think you can. I mean, I think that mentoring up is a phenomenon that happens, particularly when you're engaging in an arena where what you've learned before is not outdated, but not as current. I think someone can help you integrate into a sort of a younger world, if you will. And so I do think it has to be the right circumstance. But yes, I do think that you can get a mentor or a sponsor who is going to introduce you to individuals within a sphere that you might not have as much access to just because you've been around for a longer time.
Yes, well said. Thank you. This one, I'll have one from Haley, came in earlier in the presentation also, and she says, any advice on how to cultivate that sponsor relationship?
I believe that cultivating a sponsor, I think, is like cultivating your network. I think it engaging with them, sending them an email that says, I saw what you accomplished, I saw an award you received. That's really a wonderful thing. How did you get there? Were there things that you specifically did to prepare for that? I think, just engaging in that passionate curiosity about what other people are doing, I think actually goes a long way to foster that relationship. And I also think that every time you have an opportunity to talk with someone, it's not a one-way street. So it gives you the entree to talk about what you're doing. And that exchange, I think, develops a rapport. I think it creates a greater understanding in the sponsor about what you're doing. And that may cause the sponsor to say, I saw this opportunity last week, and I didn't think about you, but now I am thinking about you because of what you said here. So I think that, just maintaining continual contact in an authentic way actually may open doors that, that comes from your sponsor really getting to know you better. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions before we go to our panel discussion. And let's see. This one's interesting. It's from Leilani. She says, have you ever been in a bad mentor relationship, and how did you handle that? I've been working with a friend of a friend.
So I am a glass half full kind of person. So I have had a mentor that was less able to help me. But I also believe that that even in the knowing that what they're suggesting for you doesn't fit can be advantageous as well. And so this was not a bad mentor that I had, but I had a mentor who suggested to me during my training that I stay very focused on my research and not do anything outside of that. And I had a conversation with him. Actually, he was a very good mentor because he said, I really don't think it's a good idea. But when I talked with him and I said, I really want to do it, he said, okay, try. But I think he thought it wasn't going to work out. And in the end, what I was doing facilitated a future activity many years later, my service on a national organization, because I had had this experience that was outside the immediate realm of my research. And so I don't know that I've ever had a bad mentor, but I certainly have had mentors that didn't know all the answers. And so I think the key is that you have to infuse any decision making with the information that you have, coupled with what you're really passionate about. I think when you're really passionate about something, you're going to find a way to make it happen. And so you have to listen to your mentors because they come from experience, but don't just accept what they say as the final authority. And this is another reason to potentially have more than one mentor that you reach out to sort of get different opinions.
Very well said. Thank you. I think I'll let this be our final question, and then we'll ask you for some final thoughts before we move on to our panel discussion for the afternoon. And Desiree says, what was your most memorable mentoring experience?
My most memorable. Gosh, I've had many mentors who were in my corner. So I would say generally the most memorable is the surprise that I get that other people are very supportive and very laudatory of the things that I do. I think I have a tendency to be more critical of myself and think, oh, I'm not doing a very good job. And I think having mentors around you that sort of acknowledge that what you're doing is on target and that you're doing a good job, even in the face of adversity, can be memorable because it sort of counters, at least in my case, a more negative view about what I'm doing. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I would say that that's the most memorable piece.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, as we close, do you have any final words of wisdom for all of our viewers today?
I guess I would just say, I think that I love the quote by Albert Einstein about passionate curiosity, and that fits with me as someone who does research. It's kind of in my wheelhouse to always be passionately curious. But I do think that creating authenticity in the relationships that you have, as Anna mentioned, I think is a real key. And so finding a way to be passionately curious about what other people are doing, even when that engagement may not lead to something in the immediate term, you never know when that relationship will come into play later on. You never know who knows whom. And so I would just say, that networking piece is a really critical one. And it doesn't hurt to go and talk with somebody over a cup of coffee.
Wonderful advice. Thank you.